Billie-Jo Margaret Jenkins was born on the 29th of March 1983 to parents Bayard Jenkins and Deborah Barnett. Billie-Jo had a rather difficult upbringing. Her father was in prison and her mother really struggled to look after Billie-Jo on her own. As a result of this, her mother had no other option but to put her daughter into the foster care system. In 1992, Billie-Jo was quickly fostered into a well-off middle-class family who lived in Hastings, England. The family consisted of the father, Sion, and his wife Lois, and their 4 daughters, Annie, who was 12, Charlotte, or Lottie, who was 10, Esther, who was 8, and Maya, who was 7. The family coincidentally shared the same surname as Billie-Jo, Jenkins, so this made her feel right at home. Billie was described as a fun-loving girl who loved the family dog, Holly. She had aspirations to one day become an actor. On the 15th of February 1997, Lois Jenkins took 2 of her daughters, Esther and Maya, out for the day. They had gone to the seaside and also went shopping, with Lois also running a couple of errands. This left Sion at home with his other daughter Annie, who was cleaning the utility room, and his foster daughter, 13-year-old Billie-Jo, who was painting the doors on the patio in the back garden. Their other daughter, Lottie, was at a clarinet lesson. At around 3 p.m, Sion and his daughter Annie went to go pick up Lottie from her clarinet lesson, which left Billie-Jo in the back garden on her own. When Sion, Lottie and Annie had returned to the house, Sion said to his daughters that he wanted to go to the DIY store to pick up some white spirit to clean up some of the paint splashes that Billie-Jo had made in the garden. When Sion, Annie and Lottie arrived at the DIY store, Sion discovered that he had forgotten to bring any money with him, so he had to return home to pick up some cash. Sion went inside for about 3 or so minutes, and then he came back out to the car. It was reported by numerous witnesses that Sion was seen driving at least twice around the neighbourhood, which lasted from about 15 to 20 minutes, which is rather unusual and to some, quite suspicious. After arriving back home after getting the white spirit from the store, young Lottie went around the back to check up on her sister, but upon arriving outside, she found her foster sister lying in a pool of her own blood. Lottie screamed for her father, who quickly put his 2 daughters into the playroom before calling emergency services. Sion later testified that he went over to Billie-Jo and touched her shoulder, and she had a blood bubble coming out of her nose. According to the 999 call, Sion stated that Billie-Jo was still breathing when he went over to her side, but she also had severe facial and head injuries. The dispatcher told Sion to put Billie-Jo into the recovery position, but when the ambulance arrived, Billie-Jo was positioned on her back, and when they asked him if she was still breathing, he said that he didn't know, and he hadn't checked, which contradicts with what he said to the dispatcher. Unfortunately, by the time the paramedics had arrived on the scene, Billie-Jo Jenkins was dead. Police immediately started investigating and sent Billie-Jo's body to a forensic pathologist to perform the post-mortem. The results of the autopsy are as follows. The cause of death was a blow to the head, and the manner of death was homicide. Billie-Jo suffered 9 blows to the head, all in a random pattern but in close proximity of one another. Her skull was shattered, her nose was broken, and ribs 9 and 10 were also broken. Defensive wounds were noted on both of her forearms, including bruising, but some of the bruising found were older, perhaps around a week old. Internal examination showed that Billie-Jo hadn't been sexually assaulted. Blood was also found in her lungs and in her mouth, but the pathologist believed that this was likely as a result of her broken nose. The weapon was quickly determined to be an 18-inch iron tent peg, which was lying in close proximity to Billie-Jo's body. According to various sources, rather shockingly, this tent peg was never tested for DNA. Strangely, Billie-Jo had pieces of plastic black bags stuffed up her nose, similar to bags used for garbage disposal. This was allegedly found by a neighbour who was trying to help Billie-Jo after Lottie discovered her in the garden. Initially, police arrested an unnamed local man known simply as Mr. B, however he was later released under the Mental Health Act. He was seen acting suspiciously in the area and even had fragments of plastic bag in his possession at the time, but according to multiple witnesses, he was seen in a public park at the time Billie-Jo was attacked, so this quickly ruled him out. Something else which is important to note here is that Billie-Jo had confided in her friends just weeks prior about a strange man who kept following her, but this avenue was never fully explored. The second suspect was the M25 rapist Antoni Imiela. He was a German convicted rapist who attacked women and girls, one as young as 10, on the M25 route in and around London at around the same time. He was eventually found guilty of sexually assaulting 9 women and attempted rape of a 10-year-old girl. The reason that this man was linked to this case was because he always wore a leather jacket, and Billie-Jo had described the man who kept following her as someone who always wore a leather jacket. What ruled Antoni out of this case was his MO, this being that he always sexually assaulted his victims, something which had not occurred in this particular case. On the 24th of February, Billie-Jo's foster father, Sion Jenkins, was arrested on suspicion of her murder and was subsequently charged on the 14th of March. His wife, Lois Jenkins, claimed that he had a history of domestic abuse, was a very violent man, and that he had an extremely short fuse. She also claimed that Sion had even hurt their daughters, including Billie-Jo, something which was also corroborated by some of the teen's school friends who claimed to have seen the 13-year-old with various bruising across her body on multiple occasions, which were allegedly as a result of corporal punishment from her foster father. This information and the fact that Sion had apparently engaged in a sexual relationship with someone who looked very similar to his foster daughter, and the fact that he was allegedly acting very strangely around the time of the crime confirmed to police that Sion had something to hide, leading them to believe that he was somehow involved in Billie-Jo's death. Sion was a deputy head at a local school in the area, and he was a very well-respected member of the school community. But whilst investigating, police actually discovered that Sion had lied on his CV to get the job in the first place, which confirmed to police that he could not be trusted. During forensic testing, police discovered 158 microscopic blood spots on Sion's jacket, trousers, and shoes. They believed that this could have only appeared on his clothing if he had murdered Billie-Jo. The police believed that Sion had committed the crime within the 3 minutes that he had gone into the house to collect the money before leaving for the DIY store. No motive was ever established as to why Sion would have harmed his foster daughter. The defence at the trial claimed that Sion could have got the blood spots from a blood bubble that burst either in Billie-Jo's mouth or in her nose, and Sion claimed that this had actually been the case in his initial statement. Some believed that if Sion had beaten Billie-Jo himself, there would have been far more blood spots on his clothing than what was found, and they wouldn't have been microscopic, but much larger. Some questioned whether he had changed his clothes in the 3 minutes he entered the house, but his daughters who were in the car, Annie and Lottie, never reported noticing a change of clothing. During Sion's trial, the jury were never informed of his alleged violent past, however this didn't sway their decision. The jury found Sion Jenkins guilty of the murder of Billie-Jo Jenkins. His wife Lois fully believed that her husband was responsible for her foster daughter's murder. After the trial by jury on the 2nd of July 1998, Sion was sentenced to life imprisonment. In 1999, Sion Jenkins appealed for a retrial, but this was immediately rejected. In 2003, however, following 2 years of investigation by the Criminal Cases Review Commission, the case was referred back to the Court of Appeal. The basis for this referral was the fact that there was evidence suggesting that Sion had not committed the crime. The second appeal was launched in August of 2004 and was successful. The Court of Appeal said that the first conviction was unsafe and ordered a retrial, which ended up in Sion being released on bail. The second trial came and went with an inconclusive result, although this time young Lottie took to the stand. One piece of information that she gave, which was quite significant, was that she believed that the side gate into the garden might have possibly been open, but she couldn't be sure as the crime had occurred when she was a lot younger. The defence's main argument at the third trial was the blood spots on the clothing. Forensic scientists confirmed that the blood spots on Sean's clothing could have indeed come from Billie-Jo's airways. After 39 hours of deliberation, the jury was unable to decide a majority verdict. Because of this, on the 9th of February 2006 at the Old Bailey in London, Sean was declared in consequence not guilty and was acquitted of any involvement in the murder of his foster daughter. The Crime Prosecution Service also said that they were not going to do any further retrials, and because of this, Sean was formally acquitted. In total, the police investigation, the retrials and the appeals cost the taxpayer over £10 million. Over 700 witness statements were taken and the jurors spent many hours deliberating in all three trials. Sean spent 11 days in the witness box to provide evidence. Around 2010, Sean Jenkins actually applied for financial compensation for false imprisonment, but this was not granted and it never went any further. Sean and Lois Jenkins separated after Sean was convicted of Billie-Jo's murder. Lois moved to the other side of the world, to Tasmania, with her 4 remaining daughters in tow. It's reported that since then, none of the children have ever had contact with their father. Despite everything that happened, Sean maintains his innocence to this day. Billie-Jo Jenkins' funeral was held on the 23rd of April 1997 and was attended by over 300 mourners. The ceremony took place in London and her biological mother attended with her boyfriend, but upon seeing Billie-Jo's foster mother, Lois Jenkins, her biological mother ran out of the chapel and never returned. She didn't attend the service nor the burial. The latest update in the case came in 2022 when authorities revealed that they would carry out a forensic review of the evidence in Billie-Jo's case. This includes blood tests in order to obtain any bone fragments and DNA tests with the aim of matching it with any potential suspects. DNA technology continues to evolve, and police hope that, in the near future, these new technologies will finally help open new avenues of inquiry and, in doing so, hope to solve this case. A life so tragically cut short, a girl with such a bright future ahead of her taken in an instant. We can only hope that someday Billie-Jo's killer is found and brought to justice, so that those who loved her and cherished her can finally have some closure.